Through a Scottish Prism, the programme that is unapologetically pro-Scottish independence and anti-Westminster rule. Everything we say here is viewed through a Scottish Prism. Brought to you by Barhead Boy.
Hi folks, welcome back to Through a Scottish Prism. I hope you and yours are well. Been an awful week. We've had by-elections, opinion polls, we've had accusations, denials, we've had all sorts of things. And we're going to cover them today. And if I may start, Phil, with you, it was this week we had both John Healey, the Defence Secretary, who was accused of saying that the SNP, electing SNP government in Scotland would threaten national security. Whoa. Isn't that strange? I mean, you could say such a thing. Why would he say that? And do you think it would be a threat to national security?
Well, what national security? We don't even have an Iron Dome equivalent. We're sending what little we have in air defence to other countries. We don't have one ourselves. Scotland's a launching pad for nuclear weapons. The last couple of times we tried to use them hasn't worked. So what's exactly at risk here? You know, we've got 70,000 regulars. Russia, who's not interested in invading, incidentally, it's the biggest country in the world. It doesn't need more land. It's not interested in staying in Ukraine. We're not threatened by anyone. No one's looking to invade. Okay, and so what national security is he talking about? What he's talking about is a place in the Permanent Security Committee. That's what he's looking for. He wants to retain that wielding of power, that illusion that Britain still somehow matters, instead of what happened. If we remember, I think it was 2IC of the Russians said that Britain's a small island that no one listens to anymore. Well, that was about 10 years ago. You can't even see them now. It's just so insignificant and pointless. But yeah, this is David Lammy and Healey's the UK Defence Secretary, or more aptly called the Secretary for War. And yesterday he warned that the continuation of the SNP government threatens security and also Scottish jobs. Now, this is he says it's this came from the Daily Mail, so I've quickly looked at that. This is the latest sign of the growing concern within the MOD, Ministry of Defence, about the risk to the UK of nationalist rule. Nationalist rule. Where's the nationalists? I think you'll find they're all in England. After another defence minister said last month that independence would be a win for Putin. What a load of crap. So what we really need to remember is SNP ministers have also come under fire for failing to support defence jobs by previously, check this out, this is what the Mail's reporting, refusing to provide public funding for firms involved in supplying munitions. The private defence industry that Eisenhower warned us about in 1961 when he left office, saying be careful of the military-industrial complex because they will seek eternal war, which is the generation primarily of Keynesian economics, and permanent war to make money. So the bottom line is, the last point I would make on this probably is this would be good if we were seriously a threat, but the only way we would seriously be a threat, or the SNP would be seriously a threat to Britain, if it were actually a party driving us towards independence. But it's not. SNP 1 and 2 plus Section 30 is not only doomed to fail, but actually scuppers all and any pragmatic routes to independence. It's like calling the Scottish election in May 2026 a plebiscite, or even given there, as Lloyd and Eve have often mentioned, we've all mentioned it, there's supposedly a majority of independent voters in Scotland now, or independent supporting MSPs in Scotland just now. Call a snap election and go for it, or create independence, and they're not doing it. Why? Because they don't really believe in it. That's the bottom line.
Hey, Alan, it's more just scaremongering, isn't it? Remember, if you remember in 2014, they were telling us that aliens were going to land if we voted for independence. That, you know, the fish were all going to swim south. The water was going to go foul, and we wouldn't be able to make whiskey, and we'd all be living in mud huts within 2 years. I mean, they really do insult the intelligence. How could they possibly? I wish the SNP were a danger to national security. Then I'd probably be back in the SNP.
Well, they're partially right that they are a danger to national security, but it's not the English national security. because the SNP have continuously bowed the knee to the foreign princes and done what Westminster tell them to do. They have never defended Scotland, but the SNP are clearly a threat to Scotland's national defence, because they sit back and allow Westminster to continuously bring in their unpopular policies, attack our poor, attack our pensioners, and steal our money and our resources. That's where the threat to national security is, and it's not to England, it's to Scotland. I mean, Westminster has stripped us for so long of our natural resources and attacked every single poor person in Scotland. We create the funds and they take all the credit. They take all the money away from us and give us our pocket money back. And it's got to stop. I mean, if being a threat to national security is defending your democracy, defending your people, and defending the interests of your own country, then I plead guilty on behalf of every member of Liberate Scotland, because that is our duty, to defend the interests of the people of Scotland. And that is the kind of people that we need to go into the Scottish Parliament, ones that will not bend the knee. We have to stick up for our own nation. Britain is broken. But this nonsense from Labour, where they continuously, and it's not the SNP they're attacking, they may use the SNP words, but they are attacking Scotland every single time with their negativity on Scotland. And what makes it so stupid is they're not the ones who are benefiting from this. The English nationalists within Reform are the ones who are benefiting from Labour's attacks on Scotland. You see it in the polls, you see it in the elections, where Reform is rising every single time, and the Unionist votes are crumbling around them in the Labour Party and the Tory Party. So Labour are not only doing Scotland damage, they're doing damage to their own party by simply attacking another party, but in doing so, attacking the nation of Scotland. If Labour want to fight an election, then fight it on a positive ground. Or do they not have anything positive to say about their own party? Because we know exactly what they're doing in Westminster, and it is not what the people want.
No, the answer to your question, they don't have anything apart from SNP bad. That's Labour policy. They don't have anything positive to say, and we'll come on to that. But Eva, do you see the SNP electing as SNP government as a security risk?
Well, this would be funny if it weren't so tragic, because this is a quotation from David Lammy, who may as well be renamed the member for Fallopia, because he made himself an international laughingstock when he had that stupid debate about whether or not only women can have a cervix. And I'm sorry, as soon as you've come out with guff like that, your credibility will remain forever at less than zero. But the reality is that Scotland's national security is at risk day in and day out as the result of the maintenance of weapons of mass destruction on the Clyde. That is the risk to Scotland, and that is the cost of the Union, because Scotland's paying for those weapons of mass destruction. We don't want them, and they jeopardise our security and our very lives every single day that they remain there. So if the SNP were a threat to British national security, the SNP would have a live and vibrant and united campaign for Scotland's independence. They don't. So I would suggest that it is in the interest of the SNP to be described as a risk to Britain's national security, because it then leads some people to think that the SNP actually have a policy designed to break up the Union forthwith, when in fact they don't. So this is propaganda that suits the Unionist purposes, but it very much suits the SNP purposes too. And it's guff. It is unfair and it's untrue, and it's perpetrating a lie on the people of Scotland, who in the majority support Scottish independence, to promote the national security of the people of Scotland in every regard, from defence through every area of public and private life. So it's a lie, but it's one that it's pretty easy to fool some of the people with some of the time. The problem is that by continued use of social media and people talking on the streets and in their homes and in the shops, the unionists are making themselves look foolish. But unfortunately, so are the SNP by coming out over and over again with plans for Jam tomorrow that they can sell as an independence campaign, and the unionists can describe it as such, when in fact, sadly, for the time being, nothing could be further from the truth.
Absolutely. What Lammy proves is that a posh voice does not equal brains and intelligence. That is for damn sure. But here's the thing, a threat to national security. Well, I think it's a bigger threat to national security. I'm not a military man, but if you go to Faz Lane, where it's the most dangerous one, do you ever see any air defences? I think if we put in a freedom of information and ask, what air defences have you got on Glasgow, Edinburgh, Aberdeen, Dundee, Perth, Birmingham, Manchester, Liverpool, I think we would get the fright of our bloody life. They're too busy arming other countries and helping other countries fight wars for Anglo supremacy globally. That's the biggest threat. We don't look after our own nation and protect our own nation.
Yeah, I think you're right in that, Roddy. But for me, there are three things in play here. Now, first off is if the Scottish National Party in itself does not understand that an independent Scotland does threaten the security of the current United Kingdom, because when we become independent, the United Kingdom that is left is £200 billion a year less well off. Now, that obviously is a threat, but the words that are used here of state and national security takes us back to the Cold War world, which is where the British would prefer to be. And the reality is that by definition, if you want to seek the independence of Scotland, Wales, or Ireland, and remove it from the United Kingdom, then that is a threat to the United Kingdom. That's just a fact. And the ordinary people in the street know this. So when the SNP cry foul and say, we are no threat to national security, it exposes, number one, an intellectual vacuum at the centre of the SNP, whereby they have no real analysis of the position that they are in vis-a-vis the rest of the United Kingdom, because the United Kingdom has stated on a number of occasions during my lifetime that Scotland leaving the Union would be a threat to the national security of the United Kingdom. It's a fact. The ordinary people know this to be true, but it's not about a threat externally. It's an internal threat. We are an internal threat to the United Kingdom because we want to control our own economy. And if we control our own economy, then that means that the United Kingdom's economy diminishes in size, and thereby, as Phil referred to, thereby threatens the Security Council position of the United Kingdom. It threatens the independent nuclear deterrent, which doesn't work very well, of the United Kingdom. But it does not mean and does not refer to an external threat. For instance, an invasion from the Russians, an invasion from the Chinese, or the last people that beat Britain in a war, the Icelanders, who, remember, they won the Cod War. Yeah. Now, they're the last ones that beat us. The Icelanders have no interest whatsoever in coming and taking over our land. We have no enemies other than the enemy south of the Solway and the Tweed. And that is a historical reality. It is a fact. And it's a fact maintained to this day by the fact that south of the border, namely England, Westminster Parliament, steals £200 billion each and every year from the people of this country. Now, that's where the threat lies. Now, let me suggest a couple of lines of attack for the Scottish National Party, which I believe in days gone by, when Alex Salmond was in charge of the party, would have been the direct line coming back at both Healy and Lammy, which is this: the real threat to the security of the current United Kingdom is the billions upon billions poured into the Ukraine in a proxy war against Russia that benefits nobody in this country whatsoever. It denudes our personal security. Phil made reference to it. The fact that, and you made reference to it, Roddy, Where are the air defences for the United Kingdom? The air defences for the United Kingdom are currently in the Ukraine, because that's where we've sent them all. The constant railing against China. China poses no threat whatsoever to the United Kingdom, except in terms of status in the world. And China poses absolutely no threat to an independent Scotland. The real threat to Britain, to Scotland, to Wales, to Northern Ireland is the warmongering of the British English Parliament. That's what threatens the security of this country. That's what threatens the security of these people, not in any way whatsoever the desire for independence of the Welsh, the Irish, and the Scots. We'll all make our own arrangements with the rest of the world when we become independent, and then England can do exactly the same at the moment. But why should we even consider for 1 second that the security of our country, Scotland, is threatened in any way whatsoever by us becoming independent and developing our own treaties with the countries of the rest of the world? It's the very opposite. The security of this country is tied up completely with our future independence, because then we have the right, we have the ability to actually interact with the rest of the world on our own terms and not on the terms dictated by the majority of English members of the Parliament in Westminster that tells us where we fit in the world, tells us who our enemies are. The Russians are not our enemy. The Chinese are not our enemy. Our only enemy is the greed and the malice of the Westminster Parliament relative to our country and to our economy. And why, I find it impossible to understand how the Scottish National Party can try and pretend that there is no threat to the national security of the United Kingdom by parts of the United Kingdom leaving. At the moment, there's a debate going on in Ireland, provoked primarily by the British intelligence services, about Ireland's neutrality. And that Ireland's neutrality is a threat to the United Kingdom. That Ireland's neutrality is a threat to NATO. Ireland's neutrality is a threat to the European Union. It's exactly the same arguments that the Irish had to put up with in 1921 and 1922. The same arguments that are being used against us. It's nothing to do with us. It's nothing to do with the Irish. The security of the United Kingdom is the responsibility of the United Kingdom Parliament. And sooner we are no longer part of that United Kingdom Parliament, the sooner we'll be able to sort out the security that we require to interact with the world in a positive fashion and a peaceful fashion. And I would hope an opportunity to take the same line as Ireland has taken, which is to become a neutral country, interested only in supporting peace initiatives, not war initiatives like the commitment of the British government is at the moment.
Here, here. And I certainly hope that any Scottish government, future independent Scottish government, will not negotiate on weapons of mass destruction except for the removal, only over the timescale of that. Get them out. But talking of that, Phil, the typical arrogance of the English British Parliament. This is our friends in Ireland are starting to talk about a border poll because the things are rising. But here is the Governor General of Northern Ireland, Hilary Benn.
Look, the government strongly supports the union. As I've said to you before, the prospect of a border poll is way off in the distance because nobody is arguing that there is an appetite for constitutional change here in Northern Ireland. And I think we'd all be better advised to be concentrating on the issues of the moment, the needs of today, which is trying to improve the lives of the people of Northern Ireland. And that's what I'm trying to do.
The same nonsense about Scotland. Yeah, not now. It's, people are not interested in that. No, the English are not interested in it. The only nation in the world that doesn't want to be independent, Phil.
Yeah, it does, because it's desperately clinging on to the last vestiges of empire and that illusion that they somehow matter in this planet, as we've heard many times before. So first of all, let's deal with it. So the proper name of the United Kingdom, I think when we submitted to the European Union initially, was the United Kingdoms of England and Scotland, because that's what we are, two separate kingdoms united, allegedly. And then it's the Principality and the province of Wales and Northern Ireland. Northern Ireland was a valuable part of the British Empire and made money for the British Empire. It was a cash cow up till the end of the Second World War, when it ceased to be a cash cow and started to become a liability. And that's the crux of the matter here. Britain isn't so concerned about Northern Ireland because it costs money to keep Northern Ireland as part of Britain. All it does, though, it keeps the illusion of the union together, this the fact that we are all together and we are Great Britain. That's got value there, plus the value of the uber loyalists. We know the Orange Order and those unionists who quite happy sitting on their estate with their biggest outpouring of passion and support is marching up and down the street to commemorate a battle that was fought a long time ago by a foreign king of England, who any king of England's foreign, but this one's particularly foreign because it came from the Netherlands. So it's just nonsense. And in fairness to Northern Ireland and Scotland, we have provided more people to the wars, the cannon fodder. We remember in Braveheart, use the Irish, they're cheaper than arrows. Well, Northern Ireland, wake up. The best future you face is a united Ireland where you work together for the betterment of your families, your people, and your country. Because nobody really wants you, Northern Ireland, because of your embitterment. Sadly, I love the people of Northern Ireland. I think they're great people. I've got friends from both sides of that horrible sectarian divide. But the bottom line is, Northern Ireland's a liability since World War II. What Hilary Benn's talking about is not really in his hands. It's in the hands of the Irish people. Northern Ireland is moving closer and closer to being united. It's just a matter of time, as it is with Scotland. The big problem that we have, no one's talking about it. He says there'll never be a correct time. You know, nobody's interested in talking about these things right now, says Hilary Benn. Oh, bugger off, Hilary Benn. Not your business. You stay in England where you belong. We, the Scots, the Northern Irish and the Welsh, will make our own minds up. And big part of that, absolutely, will be when is it time for us to state our claim for nationhood? Let's see. But for us, it should be now, but we need the shysters and the unionists, get rid of them, like the leadership of the SNP and people like Hilary Benn.
Yeah, isn't it? I mean, that king you refer to, I believe he's very popular in G51 in Glasgow. Very popular around that area. But Alan, isn't it a case of, the typical to say the repeat, oh, now's not the time, because the English, the Anglos know whoever goes first, whether it be Ireland goes united, or Scotland leaves, or Wales leaves, when one goes, one out, they're all going out, and England diminishes. That's what they're talking about. It's not about what's good for Northern Ireland or what's good for Scotland or what's good for Wales. It's always and always will be what's good for England or what's bad for England.
Yeah, I mean, their arguments have changed over the few years. I mean, I knew Tony Benn. I met him during the Timex strike and had lots of discussions with him. And his opposition to independence wasn't about hatred of Scots or anything. It was about keeping the working class together throughout the nations. That at least was a principled stance. Not one I agreed with. I agreed more with Maclean, who said the only way to have a socialist England is, first of all, by having an independent socialist Scotland. So that is the route that any socialist should be taking, is splitting up the United Kingdom, which is a bastion for capitalism, and breaking it up into sections to show the people of England how better life can actually be out with their political masters. But Hilary Benn's argument is all based on selfishness of England, because England is the one who will lose out on this. And you have to laugh at all these English nationalists, the Robertsons, the Farages, and all the rest of them, who say we keep wanting to get our country back. Well, we're all trying to give you your country back. Scotland, Ireland, and Wales are trying their best to give England their country back and make them independent, keep them all happy. So why are they opposing us? Because it's not their country they want back, or they do want their country back, but they want our money to go with it, because they know England cannot survive on its own. And that's where their downfall is. And I have to say, well done to John Swinney, because he's either watching this programme or his advisors are watching this programme, because a couple of weeks ago, we suggested, after the Plaid Cymru result, that they set up a Celtic convention. And within a few days afterwards, John Swinney was on national news calling for a Celtic convention. So keep watching, John. You may learn something.
Indeed. They all watch, Alan. They all watch, for sure. Here's the thing, Eva, I said it earlier just today, but it's true. England seems to be the only country in the world that doesn't want independence. They don't want to be independent. They are dependent. They're clingy.
I absolutely love this because it's the most perfect opportunity to talk about the terms of the Good Friday Agreement and the provision there about a border poll being able to be held not once in a generation, but once every 7 years. So there's a valid argument for Scotland having another referendum. However, it's not the argument that appears to be propounded at the moment on behalf of the people of Scotland. But this issue here for Hilary Benn is exactly as the others have highlighted. He's dictating to the people in Northern Ireland, and although he's the Secretary of State, he should be having regard to his own duties in terms of the Good Friday Agreement, which says in terms, the UK Secretary of State, Hilary Benn, has the power to hold a border poll. They must hold one, must, not maybe, must hold one if they think a majority of people in Northern Ireland favour a united Ireland. The only argument is whether or not that majority currently exists. And it's his job to establish if that majority support for a united Ireland currently exists. That's what he's deflecting from. So it's really enlightening to read not just the Good Friday Agreement, but the commentary on it that you'll find on the website of the House of Commons. And it says, for example, what questions remain around border polls? Well, there's a debate about when it should be. The Secretary of State is not required to produce a policy that tells you how he assesses whether or not one should be called. There's an argument about whether it should be, or the form it should take, what should the question be, what should the referendum question be. But there will be a mechanism in there for the people of Northern Ireland to do what we want the people of Scotland to do, and that's to have their own de facto referendum in an election. We want to do that in Holyrood 26 because we've no got a Good Friday Agreement, and we don't have a Good Friday Agreement simply and solely because we've not got a government of the people of Scotland that are willing to push Westminster into giving us that. Because if every 7 years is good enough for the people of Northern Ireland, I'm damn fine sure it's good enough for the people of Scotland. So if Westminster will not give the people of Scotland that opportunity, then it is incumbent upon the people of Scotland to take that opportunity themselves. If it will not be given to them by the SNP, who could currently call that vote, then we make Holyrood 26 that decision maker for the people of Scotland. Not any subsequent Westminster election, and certainly not kicking the can down the road as far as 2031, but we do it now. We do it as soon as we possibly can because democracy requires it, just like democracy requires and demands it in Northern Ireland, and the people of Scotland deserve equal treatment. And if they won't give us it, we'll bloody well take it.
Yeah, well, I agree. I think it's actually, I might be wrong, but I think they say once in a generation in Northern Ireland is 7 years. They figure it's 7 years, but we don't have that, as you quite rightly say, Eva. But that's the thing about imperialists, Lloyd. They only like democracy when it works in their favour. I mean, we're seeing it in New York just now. This new mayor's been elected, and they're saying, yeah, let's get him out. It's not good. They've done it in Colombia and in Venezuela. Oh, we don't like this guy, so yeah, we don't recognise that result. And Hilary Benn's saying, well, there's no appetite for it. Well, Sinn Féin are winning all the elections. The unionists aren't winning them. It's not for him to decide. It's absolutely disgusting, these imperialists. They ignore democracy when it suits them.
Yes, absolutely. And it's an interesting situation where you have the son of one of the leading lights of the British left of the 20th century, a man who gave up a hereditary title to because of his principles. But as someone said on social media just the other day, referring to Hilary Benn, principles obviously in politics always skip a generation. Because effectively what Hilary Benn is saying is that international treaties don't matter. I think what Eva said was, you know, a perfect exposition of the failure of a Secretary of State for Northern Ireland to understand that his position exists only because of an international treaty which is overseen by the UK, the Irish government and the US government, and that this is an international treaty that cannot be broken by one of the parties. It can only be altered or changed by the agreement of all three parties and indeed the people, the electorate of Northern Ireland. His statement that there is no appetite flies in the face of every single opinion poll there has been for the past 18 months, where the gap between those that are prepared to accept, and I mean just accept the idea of a border poll, has narrowed down to a point where in most opinion polls, when you remove the no's, there is actually a majority in favour of having an opinion, of having the border poll. Now, that is not the same as a majority saying that they will vote for a united Ireland. What we have seen in Northern Ireland since the creation of the Good Friday Agreement, and that's why Hilary Benn really should not play around with it. It's not a toy. What we've seen is a narrowing of the division that caused 30 years of war within the borders of the United Kingdom of Great Britain and Northern Ireland, a vicious, brutal war that killed many thousands of people, cost millions and millions of pounds, and us here on the so-called mainland believed this was the war that this was the situation that could never be fixed. Well, it has been fixed, not perfectly, and it's not completely fixed yet. But what has happened since the creation of the Good Friday Agreement is a reduction in the conflict between the two sides, to the point where there are people who are entirely unionist in their outlook who will now say, no, we will accept having a border poll. I won't vote for a united Ireland, but I will accept a border poll. If anyone had said that to me when the Good Friday Agreement was agreed, that within 20 years we would actually be at a position where unionists are saying, no, let's have the poll, then I'd have called for medical attention. Unfortunately, Hilary Benn does not seem to understand that to maintain this developing, for want of a better description, harmony, you actually have to follow the procedures of the Good Friday Agreement. They are all on a time issue. They're all there are elements of the Good Friday Agreement which are added and added and added, and all of that leads to this development of a harmony between the two communities who only 25 years ago were at each other's throats. Now, if he doesn't accept the responsibility that he has as the Secretary of State for Northern Ireland to accept what the people of Northern Ireland want, and they are expressing in opinion polls, as I referred to, then he is not fit for that job. And I would suggest that this is, again, the Labour Party playing politics with the people of Northern Ireland because they fear reform. They know that if they were to, that reform has ties, very close ties, to the more extreme elements of the unionist and the loyalist community in Northern Ireland. And they know that this is another stick that they could beat the Labour Party with if the Labour Party missteps in this process. But unfortunately, here we are again, seeing the Celtic countries, the Northern Irish, the Scots and the Welsh, being used by the metropolitan English political parties for their own benefit, with no thought whatsoever to a circumstance that only 25 years ago was allowing people to be killed in the streets of Northern Ireland. If Hilary Benn doesn't understand that, he should read his father's diaries, because his father's diaries are very, very clear about where the Benn family, when Tony was still alive, was on the issue of a united Ireland, and how they understood clearly you do nothing to throw petrol on the fire of the division that exists in Northern Ireland. And what Hilary Benn did with that particular speech was definitely throwing fuel on the fire to no benefit other than to the benefit of the British Labour Party and to the detriment of both sides in the conflict in Northern Ireland.
Yep. And all these Tory and Labour people who pass judgment on Northern Ireland, they don't have a single MP. No one elected in Northern Ireland, and yet they rule over it. It's called imperialism, folks. But here's the thing. We say here, we would like a plebiscite or a referendum because we know we would win it. That's why we want it. We don't want one because we'd lose it. Why do you think, folks, they don't want a border poll? They don't want a Scottish independence referendum because they know they would lose it. That's why they don't want it. It's nothing to do with anything else and any of the lies they tell you. And they keep telling lies. But this week as well, the British press come out with this one, Phil, about Alex Salmond's widow, that she may be forced to sell off the family home to pay off the debts. Now, do we believe that, or do we think it's just more sticking the boot into the great man?
Yeah, it's more sticking the boot into the great man. And it is as simple as that. So for me, when I look at this, I mean, we have serious concerns about this one, and you definitely can't you've got to look carefully what the mainstream media is saying. Look at the headlines. I looked at the Scotsman, okay, and it reads: Alex Salmond's widow Moira could be forced to sell family home to pay off debts. Alex Salmond's widow may reportedly have to sell her family home to pay off the former First Minister's debts. Moira Salmond, 88, could soon be hit with a massive bill, etc., etc., etc. People say they don't believe the papers, and yet they spout headlines because we're lazy. We're not interested in doing the research and finding out what's really going on. So what's really going on? Well, I'll let others speculate on that, on this headline. But let's deal in facts. And the main facts that I believe people who consider on this, and in particular in consideration of the status of Alex Salmond's political legacy, are these points. 1, he's without doubt the greatest politician Scotland has produced in her lifetime. 2, he's been hounded, hunted, and generally lied about by the British establishment since they recognised the threat he and the SNP under Alex posed to the existence of the UK, and the continuation, which is the thing they don't like most, of the milking of the cash cow that is Scotland by the bad actors of the Union. He was stitched up as number 3, with false accusations from within the SNP and the Scottish Government and the Scottish press, all in collusion with the British establishment, and we need a full deep dive investigation into what happened here. Who lied? And for those who have found to be lied, need to be prosecuted to the full extent of the law. Nicola, John Swinney and Angus Robertson, plus the alphabet women, don't want that to happen. I wonder why. The current SNP leadership is the last point, including Herr Sturgeon, are not fit to tie his shoelaces. And when all this becomes public knowledge, which we need in Scotland, to cleanse the SNP of unionist quislings, is something we should all fund. And I, for one, am happy to donate.
You're on mute, Rory.
I didn't know. How's that? Am I back?
That's better. Yep.
When I owe myself a quid. When we're back in when you're reading the British press or you're hearing the BBC, when you hear words like could, might, maybe, perhaps, you immediately should get on your suspicious hat, shouldn't you?
Yeah, and this is one of the biggest problems when you allow the media to police themselves, because they continuously tell lies and there's no comeback for them. But I mean, if it is true, it rips my heart right out, because Moira Salmond is one of the nicest, gentlest, hardworking women I have ever met. I mean, at a time where she should be grieving for her husband, one of the greatest politicians, like Phil said, in Scottish history, she's been faced with this, either lies from the press or pressure put on her from an inadequate legal system. Because the Scottish legal system should be based on innocent until proven guilty. But if you have to spend hundreds of thousands of pounds to prove you're innocent, and it puts you in a financial difficulty, then there is something wrong with our justice system, because that in itself is a punishment, and a punishment for someone found innocent. And at the same time, we'll have those who were guilty of bringing ridiculous charges against Alec, some of them openly lying in court and being defended by the justice system, while it is possible that a man who spent hundreds of thousands of pounds just to prove his own innocence is now, his widow is now having to suffer the consequences of that. Where is that justice? In what book is that justice? If you are innocent, then you should not receive any punishment at all. And in Alec's case, a jury of his peers in the highest court of our land was found innocent on every single charge against him. Those who conspired against him are still in high-paid jobs, sucking the gravy from our tax money. And yet, there's a possibility that Moira could be in a financial difficulty. That is not justice. And we need, if this is true, that whole system to be investigated and find out where it has gone wrong. And like Phil, if there is a crowdfunder, I will happily donate.
Yeah, I think that's the truth of it. I mean, I think if it is true, a crowdfunder, Moira would have no worries and she would never have any financial worries. But it's a disgrace that even if it was true that these people put this out in the press to what? Because even in death, they're still scared of them. That's the real truth, the truth.
It is indeed, because if in years to come, people will look back on this and they are already including Alec's name beside Wallace and Bruce and Maclean and all the other Scottish heroes. And this is an utterly disgusting course of conduct that we've seen over the past wee while, because there's been a drip, drip, drip feed of stories. It could be this, it could be that, it could be whatever. But the fact of the matter is, as Phil has described, Alec was hounded. He was falsely accused. There was indeed a conspiracy. If you know who the people involved are, you can see how the conspiracy developed and you can see where the faults lie. I'm not naming anybody because I'm not breaking any law in that regard. But I hope with all my heart that one day these people will be exposed for what they are. But it is below the belt and beyond to be doing what they're doing to Alec's widow. In essence, Alec gave his life to Scotland. He gave his life up for Scotland in essence, because he lived and he breathed for independence for our country. And he was one of these men who didn't only make Scotland walk tall, as Kenny McCaskill says. He spoke eloquently from his heart and with his brain in respect to what Scotland could be and what he wanted the people of Scotland to achieve. And he did what Rudyard Kipling wrote about. He could speak with a common man and he could speak with kings, but he would never lose the common touch. And he was a man, and he'll always be a man that people in our movement look up to and looked up to for the right reasons. So if his estate was bankrupt, it's because it suited the British establishment and Alec's enemies within the Scottish independence movement, the imposters, the gravy trainers, those who are in the movement for the wrong reasons, for self-interest, for reward, frankly, for writing books and making money, telling stories and spinning tales. So I hope that there's a crowdfunder, but whether or not there is, I'm absolutely certain there'll be a lot of private individuals worldwide desperate to contribute to make sure that Moira is able to hold on to her home and that her closing years of her life do not involve her being haunted by these spectres, these awful people in the press who really seriously ought to take a good look at their consciences, look at themselves in the mirror and wonder what it is that they're trying to do to a lady who's innocent and who continues to grieve. It is beyond the pale, and every one of them that's written about this in the terms that they've used should be held accountable in the court of public opinion.
I absolutely agree. Unfortunately, the wheels of justice grind slowly, Lloyd. That Alec didn't live long enough to get another day in court to prove his innocence and bring the guilty in front of the courts.
Yes, indeed. But there's a certain symmetry in us arriving at this particular subject, given the opening subject, where we had the Defence Secretary of the United Kingdom declaring that the Scottish National Party is a threat to national security. Alex Salmond, in the minds of the security services and the establishment of the United Kingdom of Great Britain and Northern Ireland, was the greatest internal threat to the security of the United Kingdom of Great Britain and Northern Ireland that they had had since probably the leaders of the IRA. And as a result of that, Alec had to be brought down. The great tragedy of it was, though, in typical British manipulative fashion, if you read the history of the manner in which the British intelligence services operate across the world and within our own country, even during things like the miners' strike, if you read that history, then you realise very clearly that what happened to Alec was manipulated, was controlled and carried out at the behest of the British establishment. Unfortunately, they were ably abetted by people who had been formerly very close to Alex Salmond, some of whom are currently senior ministers in the Scottish government. Now, there can be no doubt whatsoever that if it wasn't for the collaboration of the former First Minister, Nicola Sturgeon, and indeed the head of the civil service, Leslie Evans, then the case against Alex Salmond would never have even seen the court. That the process in itself was corrupt. And fortunately, Alex's peers, namely the jury in his trial, were clearly aware of the conspiracy that had been created against him and the falsehoods that had been presented against him that led to his prosecution. And they were clever enough, they were honest enough, and they had enough integrity to reject the charges against him and acquit him on all charges. The tragedy is that those who wished to see him convicted, both those former friends and colleagues, those elements in the media in Scotland, his political enemies, and most especially the British establishment, have not taken the loss of the court case very well, which is why even now, after his death, they still pursue this vicious campaign to traduce his reputation. And this will go down and will be exposed in history as one of the darkest days, or the darkest days of Scottish politics in the early 21st century. And I look forward to the day when those, particularly the former colleagues who still have positions of power and positions of status in this country, are named and shamed for their contribution to the traducing of Alex Salmond. As for the situation regarding Moira, I cannot for the life of me understand how it is possible that people who have met Moira, who have known Moira over many years, these same people that I'm referring to in the current Scottish government, how they can behave in this manner and face themselves in a mirror of a morning. I do not, for the life of me, I cannot understand it. And in some ways, I look forward to the day when those very individuals are removed from public life. And I would suggest to anyone and everyone who understands the tragedy of the corruption and destruction of Alex Salmond's reputation, that they take the opportunity in May of next year to remove those very people, because those people do not have this country's best interests at heart. They do not have the best interests of the independence movement at heart. For if they did, they would have taken no part whatsoever in the conspiracy against Alex Salmond that led to his untimely death. And now, subsequent to his death, the pressure and the threat to his widow are, it's genuinely beyond my understanding how any of these people can consider themselves to be servants of the public, or indeed decent human beings.
Yep. Betrayal never comes from strangers, that's for sure. Eva, I'd like to come back to you for this next question, moving on somewhat. We know that there's an appeal by the Scottish Government against the Supreme Court clarification of the law. And this is what John Swinney had to say. And I'm not sure he's correct in this. And I want to ask you, once you've heard this short clip.
In April, you said that you accepted the Supreme Court judgment in the For Women Scotland case, yet your government is now back in court fighting to allow men who identify as women to remain in women's jails. Why are you doing that?
That's a live legal case, and I won't be commenting on live legal cases.
That isn't strictly, am I right? Assuming you're the lawyer, you'll be able to tell me. That's a cop-out by him there. This is an appeal. It's not the same thing, is it?
I'm going to speak directly to the First Minister. John, you're a coward and you're a liar. Okay? You're a liar because this is a civil case, not a criminal case. You can say whatever you want. And you're a coward because what you're doing is prolonging the agony of the women who know that the Supreme Court decision is the right one. This is a court action to do with whether or not men should be allowed in women's prisons. And the straightforward, clear and obvious answer is no, they should not. So John speaks with forked tongue once more. The Supreme Court said that sex in the Equality Act of 2010 means biological sex. There is now no other kind of sex. And so the risk assessment that the Scottish Prison Service has to conduct to establish which prison to incarcerate a male prisoner in is very simple. They only have to establish the prisoner's sex. And if he's male, even if he says he's a trans-identifying male, he's male. He's not female, and he never will be, in law, in terms of the Equality Act, a woman. Therefore, he has no right to be in a prison built for women. He can argue that he deserves a different prison from men because he considers himself not to be a man, but his personal view that he is female is flawed in fact and in law, and it will forever be so. So what John Swinney and his government are doing is that they are actively breaking the law, and they are spending hundreds of thousands of pounds of taxpayers' money in so doing. In addition, they are steadfastly refusing or delaying to pay to For Women Scotland the legal expenses already awarded to For Women Scotland by the courts. There is no course of action he can take to get round that award of expenses. It's got to be paid. If it's not paid, there will be what's called a taxation, where a court simply reiterates and confirms the actual balance due. That'll cost more money. The Scottish Government will lose the taxation and they'll have to pay the expenses for that as well. So the full amount keeps increasing. For Women Scotland won't stop. They are fully and completely supported and funded by women whose pockets may not be deep, but they are endless insofar as women who can afford 50 pence up to women who can afford hundreds of thousands of pounds will make sure that biological sex means sex and that men have no place in women's prisons, women's refuges, women's hospital wards, that little boys don't get to use little girls' toilets or changing rooms, and that swimming baths don't have areas that men can invade women's single-sex spaces. Because women want wheeshed, and the Women of Scotland's campaign, which has gone international, will never be forgotten, and there will be no let-up, John. We wiped the floor with Nicola Sturgeon. Hamza Yousaf made a fool of himself. You may very well find that you are the next First Minister who loses your job as the result of your stupid, wrong-sighted, wrong-minded opposition to the very simple fact that sex is immutable and that men will never be women.
Well said, Eva. Well said. On this, moving on, Kenny McCaskill came out and said, we know that there's never going to be a Section 30 again. Everybody and your granny knows that, except the SNP. I want to play a wee clip for you first, Phil, before I ask you the question.
There is going to be no second referendum. The British government, Tory and Labour, have made that clear, and Farage echoes it. The Supreme Court have ruled out the opportunity for us to use it. That doesn't mean we do nothing. What it does mean is we use the strategy that Alec bequeathed us, and we take our destiny into our own hands. No more pretty please can we have a second referendum. No more I'll get down on my knees if I get a mandate and I'll ask for a referendum.
I agree with Kenny. Every word he said there, Phil, absolutely every single word is right. And yet, Alapa, you were at Hope Over Fear when one of the prominent members of the NNC was they're promoting vote for the SNP when they know that a vote for the SNP will not get them anything but going down and bended knee and begging for a Section 30. I don't understand. Reason that with me. How can they promote SNP 1, Alapa 2, when they know it's a waste of time voting for the SNP?
It's a conundrum I struggle with. As you know, that I believe that was an event that we were all at in Glasgow, and I also, as you quite rightly pointed out, stood in when Eva couldn't make it briefly at an event in Coatbridge, where I spoke alongside Kenny and Tommy at Hope Over Fear, where the similar story was told. I said it that I want people with fire in their belly and people that stand up for Scotland. And how do you say this? I said at the time I would love to see people like Tommy and love to see people like Kenny represent us, because they're long-standing politicians. The problem I've got is something doesn't match here. Something's not right here. And I'm loath to speculate, to put my finger on it, because I love the idea of the Alapa Party. I think what Alec was doing was right. I mean, Kenny's absolutely correct in his first point, but the second part doesn't fit, and here's why. If SNP really were looking to unite the independence movement, they would say SNP 1 and Alaba 2, but they're not. So how can echoing SNP 1, Alaba 2, when SNP haven't bought into it, possibly work, especially given what we've just talked about when we listened to what Eva was clearly pointing out over the Jen Swinney talking nonsense on the FWS court case, on which I would comment incidentally is really, really simple. Eva nailed it. But the majority of Scotland, John, which you don't listen to, disagree not just on the FWS and the women don't wish kind of thing, and the SNP's continuous failure for the last 11 years to deliver on independence. The answer to both is the same. The difference on the women won't wish case is bollocks, John, or not. Simple as that. And this approach, I can't understand. I can't get to the bottom of it because it doesn't make sense, Roddy. We all know it. Yeah. And the other thing is, no woman or no one who gives a damn about women's rights is going to vote SNP1 if they've been paying attention. That's the trick. That's the name of the game. The illusion and the deluding people into believing that SNP are still a party for independence. That's what they're hanging on. What Kenny's coming at, he must be playing the numbers, because I don't like thinking of what the other reasons might be for doing this.
When you said bollocks, no pun was intended when you were talking about
no, deliberately. Kenny, on women's rights and on this Brawleygate thing, it's like, it's bollocks or not. Simple.
Phil says he doesn't want to say it, but here's what I'm going to say. Kenny saying one thing, and he's actually he's like so many, he's putting party before the cause. That's the reality. He thinks his best bet is to smooth talk the SNP voters into giving them the second vote. That's what it's down to. You can't say one thing, though, and do another.
No, you can't. And it's a ridiculous situation to have. I mean, SNP are losing votes after votes after votes because of their ideology, this stupid queer ideology that has already been kicked out of the courts, and they're still wasting our money that could be put into services, helping the starving, helping the homeless, helping addictions. But they are wasting money attacking women to stop women getting the rights that the court has already given them. That's just ridiculous. John has got to learn, if you have a dick, you are not a chick. And you don't have to be a gynecologist to work that one out. It is pure and simple fact. It is a law of nature. But for Kenny and other SNP, other ALBA members to call for an SNP one vote, think about what that means. Because it's not, and the SNP have already told you, it's not to gain independence, it's to seek permission from Westminster to have another referendum.
Yeah.
What you are actually doing, if you are voting SNP 1 on the constituency, then you are re-electing those who conspired against Alex Salmond, who are now possibly putting Alex Salmond's widow's house under threat. That's what you're doing. You're now voting for the individuals standing under an SNP banner. These same individuals who not only backstabbed one of their leaders, they tried to jail him. They are not supporting the independents now. They are supporting crawling on their knees, asking Westminster's permission to free our land. Well, if you're a true Scottish independent supporter, you do not bend the knee to Westminster or anyone else. You do not seek permission from a foreign country for your own independence. That permission is given and granted by the people of your country. And that is what Liberate Scotland is going to do. And I'll tell you one other thing. And I apologise for this, Roddy, but I'm going to put a wee plug in here. In 1314, Robert the Bruce brought the Smafolk to Bannockburn to fight for Scottish independence. On the 28th of November this year, we are asking the Smafolk to come to the King Robert Hotel at Bannockburn to support Liberate Scotland's fundraiser to fight the election that will gain us the independence.
Well said. There you have the fundraiser there. Eva, we're saying, what is the motivation? Well, here's because this is to compound it even more. Business in Scotland, the SNP were talking about their great new partnership with business in Scotland. And if you read this road independence map, great headline, but when you read through and analyse it, Eva, they're talking about 1930, 2031 before they're going to be going for it. Why are we waiting? There's no need to wait. So it's just more of the same. One more mandate so we can get told to get lost.
You've just answered your own question. This is about jam tomorrow because it's never jam today. And the reason why it's jam tomorrow is because the SNP know perfectly well that if next year was a de facto referendum, if we had one independent supporting candidate in every constituency with no competition, and if we had a managed, organised, proper campaign on the list, there would be what Alec and Colette and others call a supermajority, and we would be negotiating the terms of our independence. That's what would happen. And then there would be another election. And it is not likely that in the first election in a truly independent Scotland, the SNP would be in the majority, because people would no longer have to vote on the constitutional question. They would be able to vote in terms of their political beliefs within an independent country running its own affairs. So the SNP would probably still exist, but they would be one of many parties who would probably have to end up with a coalition, which would probably be slightly left of centre. So this is about self-serving. It's not about how do you create the circumstances that give us the electoral event and the democratic mandate to demand the legal right recognised by Westminster and, importantly, internationally, to negotiate the terms of the settlement. This is called, technically, can kicking. And what it means is that those who fall for it, those who are duped by it, have done, again, what they've been doing since 2014. They've been fooled. Now, we were all fooled when Nicola Sturgeon took over. It took us a wee while to see the light, but we've seen the light, as have so many others, including the rebels in the SNP who lodged the sadly unsuccessful amendment at their conference a few weeks ago. Cast your mind back to that conference and remember with great care and great caution the promises that were made then by both John Swinney and Keith Brown. They spoke then about a convention, and Keith Brown said it had started or it was starting the following day. Since then, there has been no more word about the convention, but the convention is referred to in the Believe in Scotland missive, but the suggestion is that the convention will not be up and running until after next year's election. This is called cart and horse. And what should be happening if this country was governed by serious politicians and if think tanks and allegedly pro-independence organisations did what it said on the tin, the convention would have been up and running probably about 9 years ago. And if that had happened, we would have been independent 4 or 5 years ago. And now we would be looking at the bounty from all of our resources being spent in Scotland for the good of the people of Scotland. We may very well by now have had a positive action and steps taken in respect of having an oil fund and a wind fund and a wave fund and a National House Building Corporation, a national energy company. All of these things would be ours today as of right. And if people fall for Believe in Scotland, I can guarantee you that in 5 years' time or 10 years' time, the whole of Scotland will be looking back saying, oh my God, why the hell did we allow ourselves to fall for it once again? They're at it, and they're at it because they're self-serving. What they should do is talk about a convention, create a convention this weekend, get a strategy and make next year's election a de facto referendum, get the job done, and then build the country Scotland is destined to be. Can I just say very quickly, Roddy, my son asked me the other night, when did I decide that I wanted to be a lawyer? I don't know. But the reason why I'm a lawyer is because I like to think that life is actually meant to be fair. And if an independence campaign is going to be fair, and a government that says it wants independence is going to play fair with the people of the country, then the SNP and Believe in Scotland will come up with a campaign to attain independence at the next election, not further down the line.
Yeah. You did say, I hate ever to pull you up for anything, Eva, because you're always usually right, but you did say cart and horse, when of course you should have said horse and shit, because it is a load of horse shit. But here's the thing, Lloyd, Kenny's saying one thing and doing another. And he's standing, but the party, Alep is standing aside saying that Alec gave us a plan, and Alec's plan at that time was great. SNP 1, Alep 2, and we'll get a supermajority and negotiate our independence. That's what Alec's plan was. But this time, they've made it clear with their partners in Business for Scotland, if we know it, Kenny knows it. But they're standing aside for the SNP and the constituency and saying, well, still give us your list vote. That to me is putting your party before the nation.
There's no question about that, Roddy. The ALPA strategy is a flawed strategy. Apart from anything else, Kenny knows very well, as an ex-member of the Scottish National Party, the vast majority of the members of the ALPA party are ex-members of the SNP who were disenchanted with both the strategy for independence, but more importantly, were more than disenchanted with the manner in which Alex Salmond was treated by the Scottish National Party, particularly the current leadership. So why Kenny believes that he can motivate his activists to go out and champion a vote for the SNP when those are the very people who left the SNP because of their dislike of the direction it was taken is a mystery to me. Except in terms of, I mean, when I first heard this, this strategy outlined, it was outside the Scottish Parliament, and it was articulated by the former leader of the Scottish Socialist Party, Tommy Sheridan, the convicted perjurer. Now, that said to me that this was a desperate need to get elected again. Again, what tends to happen with people who get that bug is they will put party before country if they believe that the fact that they get the opportunity to make speeches in a parliament, that in some way will advance the cause of the party. I just see that as ego. I don't see that as a genuine political analysis. But what I really don't understand about Kenny's position is this, that if you believe that the second vote, that this should be or rather that next year should be a plebiscite. In a plebiscite, you count all votes. So why is it that the Alapa Party is failing to speak to the Independence for Scotland Party, is failing to talk to Liberate Scotland, is failing to talk to the Scottish Socialist Party, is failing to talk to any of those smaller parties of the broader movement, drawing them together to create the votes we need for to win a plebiscite election? But I think in some ways, because I'm still in the Scottish National Party, and I thought very briefly when Alec was still alive of joining the Alapa Party, the fact of the matter is, since Alec's death, the Alapa Party is no longer relevant. That's clear from each and every one of the council by-elections it's been a part of. And it makes me less than happy to have to say that, because I know so many good people who left the SNP to join the Alapa Party believing that that was a way forward. And it was, until the point that Alec was no longer here. It no longer has the cohesion that it had under Alex. It no longer has the magic touch with the people. And I think in some ways, the honest thing for the Alapa Party to do at this particular point would be for it to start talking to the other smaller parties of the national movement and create a coalition, or to join the coalition that is Liberate Scotland. Because at the moment, the Alapa Party only serves to, particularly with this flawed strategy of vote for the SNP in the constituency and vote for Alapa on the regional list, all it does is confuse and split the vote. Because in real terms, if Alapa is entirely committed to Alec's concept of a supermajority, then they would be asking their own members and committing their own people to voting for real independence candidates on the constituency and not depend on the list. You cannot get a majority in the Scottish Parliament on the list alone. You can only get a majority through the constituency and the list combined. And I don't understand why they will not go down that particular route. And also the other thing is this. We've come to the point where large numbers of people who support independence will no longer vote for the SNP. The Alaba Party know this. They also know that given the ridiculous missteps in policy that the SNP have had over the past few years, that the women of this country, and particularly younger women who will be voting for the first time next year, will not vote for the SNP because of the flawed way in which they tried to introduce the Gender Recognition Reform Bill and other elements of that. So effectively what Alapa are saying to the people of Scotland is, endorse the SNP, endorse the last 10 years of SNP leadership by saying vote for the SNP on the constituency. That is an intellectually untenable position. If we have got to the stage like the people of Ireland got to in 1919, where the Irish Parliamentary Party no longer served the purposes and the desires of the people of the country, they were rejected. And they were rejected by the people who had previously supported them. We are now at that stage in Scotland. The time for the rejection of the Scottish National Party is now, not later down the line, not later when Kenny's got back in the Parliament or when Thomas Sheridan's got back in the Parliament on the back of SNP votes. To do what? Nothing. The time is now for the removal of the Scottish National Party for all the things we've laid out here over many, many months now. All of the things that they have done to corrupt the politics of our country, and indeed their failure to advance the cause of independence in any way whatsoever, makes it clear to me and makes it clear to very many people it is time for the Scottish National Party to be removed from the field. And that can be done in May of next year. And that is exactly what the Alapa Party should be arguing for. But in failing to do so, is in actual fact making itself plain that they are exactly the same as the SNP and it is party before country every single time. Shame on them.
I just say one of the things I can't understand is how you're still in the SNP, but that letter should drop through your letterbox one day very soon. Folks, as usual, the clock's run out, and I'd also many more things I wanted to discuss. We haven't got round to them. But we will be back next week. And until then, may you and yours, please take care.
Through a Scottish Prism, the programme that is unapologetically pro-Scottish independence and anti-Westminster rule. Everything we say here is viewed through a Scottish prism. Brought to you by Barhead Boy.